Welcome to another episode of Cyber Bites, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, and today's guest is Jason Kaplan, the CEO of SixMap. A fascinating career background from fitness tech to cybersecurity. We talk all things SixMap. Enjoy the show.
All right, and we're on. Introducing Jason Kaplan, CEO at SixMap. How you doing, mate?
Fantastic, Joseph. Thank you for having me on.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you're feeling good because as I was saying off air, my legs are still absolutely hurting from my half marathon on the weekend. And then you just showboated me and said that you've done 6 marathons in the past. So yeah, fair play to you, mate.
Well, you got to do a half before you can do a full. I'm sure now that you've done a half, you'll want to do 26.2 miles, or I guess
Exactly.
44 kilometers for you, right?
That's the one. Yeah. So I've got the bug, let's say, but we'll see. We'll see. So look, man, thanks for coming on. How have you been? How's life? I saw you've been sort of doing a bit of road showing, and I think you was at the DMV Rising conference recently.
A fair amount of travel. I mean, DMV Rising, which is for the Mid-Atlantic region, trying to get the tech community together. I was at a event in New York City last week, and I'll be back up. We're fortunate to get to speak at B-Sides this Saturday, for New York B-Sides. And so, yeah, we've been trying to get out there and meet as many people and talk to as many people as we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I did see that you're at B-Sides as well. Is this Saturday coming, did you say?
Yeah, in
Okay.
3 days, and it'll be an interesting topic. They have an entrepreneur track this year,
Right.
and so we are. I am speaking on why great technologists may not make a great CEO,
Mm.
um, and but really just talking about kind of what the difference is between being a technical leader and a CEO, and if you want to do it, certainly many have, and you just need to know what you're getting into because CEO is not for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're definitely somebody great to be part of that panel and discussion because your career is we'll talk about it now, but one that's quite different. So, Jason, with all my guests, I like to take it back to where it all began and how you got into the industry, I guess.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't think I'd be here, that's for sure. I mean, I have a degree in finance. I have never really written a line of code in my life. But after a stint at Merrill Lynch, I saw what was going on in the tech world, and now we're going back almost 30 years, and said, wow, I think there's something there. And so I was fortunate enough to become a part of a web hosting company really early on, and then I was the first sales leader at Akamai in 1999, and helped build that initial organization. And really was kind of part of the early, I don't know, generation or folks that really were building those first internet companies. Uh, my path was not direct this moment because I took kind of a hard turn in 2010, went to work for a VR goggle company, where I got to have some just a great fun and see some really cool use cases for simulation. And then I was a founder for the first time, a founder CEO. Back to the running conversation,
Mm,
a friend of mine and I thought we had a pretty interesting idea about how to put a low cost device on people's shoe, collect data, and be able to do some really interesting marketing and coaching things with that data. So I was pretty deep into the running world. So we built that business over 5 years and then sold it to a company called Zwift. So if you're a
yep.
cyclist, you may know them. And really, I made a move into cyber about 5 years ago. A friend of mine from Israel, who I had worked with in the past, called me and said they had built a very compelling technology to identify advanced attacks (APTs), based on sort of piecing together legitimate actions that an attacker might take into a vector that you could not explain other than it must be an attack. And
Mm,
so I did some consulting for them. Then they asked me to be CEO. I got deep into the cyber community at that point, really got to know a lot of the investors and folks like yourself.
mm.
And then after I left that company, Data Tribe called and said, "Hey, would you be interested in running SixMap?" And so about a little less than a year and a half ago, I took over CEO of SixMap.
Love it, love it. Well, pretty incredible career. I guess, are there any like real particular standouts or moments where you look back and it really just stands out as being like a real pivotal moment for you?
I mean, I guess I'd say a few, and I kind of mentioned them. I mean, the first time I heard about Akamai, I mean, it was sort of an accidental thing. Somebody that had worked for me at Digex went to work at Akamai. I was up in Boston trying to hire their replacement, and we were supposed to go to dinner. The guy that left Digex was a good friend, and so we were just going to go have dinner. And it turned out his boss, who I also knew, joined us for dinner. And next thing you know, it turned into an interview. And as soon as I heard what Akamai did, I mean, it was solving a peering issue that was very apparent that I knew that problem very, very well. And it's like, gotta go. And so it was, so that was a pretty pivotal moment for me.
Mm.
I think another one was being a founder for the first time, trying to, taking that leap where, you decide to forego salary and put money in and, sort of really take the burden on your back. That was my first time as a CEO. Also, that
Mm.
was pretty pivotal because I had said in my past that I do not want to be a CEO. And then I guess the third moment is how I got where I am today, which is when that friend called from Israel and said, "Hey, we got this cyber technology," and I'm like, "You really want me? Like, I'm not a cyber guy."
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I think you can help us." And here I am in a world where, look,
Mm.
I think I will be in cyber for the rest of my career. It is hard. I've had
Mm.
very successful friends leave cyber and say, "Stay out," because it's hard. But there's a mission orientation that you don't get with most other businesses, and it's really, really important that we win this battle.
Mm. So I know that it's not your first time as being CEO of a company you've not founded. So obviously you was the CEO of SideTwist. That business, like how was it actually taking a CEO role, a business you hadn't founded?
Um, it's hard. I mean, it obviously depends on the circumstances. I've only done it twice, and in some ways they were similar circumstances. Very, very powerful technologies that were true innovations that were struggling a bit to find product market fit and really start ramping and go to market.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of challenges, and I'll speak generally, not so much about SixMap or SideTwist, but first the culture and team is really important. A founder is pretty important to the company, and they've built the fabric, they've built the culture. They are kind of the I don't know, the hub at the at the wheel. They're the center of
Mm.
everything. And to come in and sort of replace them, it has to be done right, because you could really turn off a lot of employees and change the culture in a negative way. And so the biggest first thing I think is sort of making sure that you get the right people, you keep the right people on the train that you want on the train, get the
Mm.
people that shouldn't be off, and do that while really putting the culture in a spot where people feel like they can succeed.
Mm.
Um, that's probably the biggest and hardest, softest challenge. From there, then you got to do all the basics. You got to make sure that you develop a product that the market wants, get product market fit, figure out how to do repeatable selling motions, all of the
Mm.
things that we all know.
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the people part. And I guess one question for you, how would you describe your leadership style?
Um, I'm kind of transparent and open to a fault. Like, I mean, I understand nuance, and I think sometimes you have to really think through how you position things and how you say things. But I've just, I was raised in a family where it was very open communication all the time, and I think for me, the most important thing is people know that, they may not like every decision I make, they may not agree with everything I say, but I'm going to give it to them straight.
Mm.
And then, they can choose to be a part of that or not. So I think my communication style is mostly just very direct. Look, I've been doing this a while, and I think we need to have a little bit of fun in life. And
Mm.
so, balancing the intensity of purpose, the need to really go at things hard, because there's companies coming at us, and there's lots of people working harder than we are probably, with having some fun. I think finding that right balance is important, especially today.
Love it, love it. Well, what drew you to SixMap? So I know you mentioned Data Tribe gave you a call. Like, what was it about SixMap that drew you there?
Yeah, I think it was there's really kind of three main things. First, I knew the guys from Data Tribe, and I
Great
like them.
bunch.
And yeah, and I think investors and board members can be really additive and important to the success of a company. They can also be challenging. And so I was comfortable that I would be joining a company and leading a company where the board and the investors would be supportive. So that's really important. So Data Tribe would be number one. Number two, the founder and the initial capability, I just think is really powerful. I believe that the core technology that we have, the core approach that we have, is really different. even in a crowded market. And I think that the world has, as we'll talk about soon, sort of compromised on current tools. And I thought we could really change that, which leads to the third point, which is when I talk to people that I knew in cyber about the current solutions that we were trying to displace and enhance, people just generally thought they weren't awesome. And so it felt like, good and really good investors and supportive board with a very powerful core technology, going at a market that's pretty big and where I think the tool sets are underwhelming.
Got it. Well, before we talk more about SixMap specifically, can you tell me a little bit more about the problem space in general?
Yeah, it's really pretty simple, and it sounds cliche, but it's true, right? You can't protect what you don't know, and visibility. That word visibility is people have a love-hate relationship with it, but really understanding what's on your network, what's running today, what's visible to an attacker, what's not, is very challenging, and I think that when we talk about the problem space, I'll talk about it more in a moment, but I think the current tool sets, which evolved probably reasonably over time, in our opinion, they sort of ask the wrong question about visibility. And so they give an incomplete answer. And not only is it incomplete, but it's often noisy. So you hear CISOs and other people say, like, I don't want more visibility. I'm sure there's some truth to that, but I think a big part of the problem is it's noisy. And so when you spend a lot of your time trying to prove that something somebody told you is your problem is actually not your problem, if you're spending a lot of time proving it's not your problem, like, you're wasting your time. And so I think there's a real opportunity to make the visibility more complete and less error, with less errors, with less noise, and then you can really help people protect you can help them know what's theirs and help them protect it.
Yeah, this ties nicely into SixMap. Then tell us tell us more.
Yeah, so it's interesting because when people ask me what's SixMap, I give an answer I don't like, but it's sort of I don't know how not to do it, and so there's a category called external attack surface management that is, from an attacker's perspective. I can't install anything. I don't have permission. There's no agents. From an attacker's perspective, what can I see? What's public facing on a network that I might be able to go exploit? And so this EASM category tries to tell their customers what's public facing that an attacker can see. And so therefore, what do you have to close? What doors do you have to close, or what things do you have to take offline to reduce your risk profile? So I say I don't like saying it because, again, we think tools there have under delivered for a period of time, but that's what we do. And then I say EASM plus plus. Why plus plus? Because there's some things that we do different. And I said before, sorry, were you going to ask?
I was just going to say, yeah, talk to me. What are you doing different?
Sure. So there's a couple things. I said before that I think current tools ask the wrong question. And I think the question they ask is, okay, how do I protect your network? And like, that makes sense, right? I'm here to protect your network. But we think that you need to start before that. We think the right question to ask is, how do I protect your entity? And the entity could be your company. It could be, the state of Maryland, which is where I'm sitting. It could be a DoD agency. So how do I protect the entity? And to some people, it might not sound like that big a difference, but it's a really big difference, because what you have to do if you're going to protect the network, and this is what you see, is those companies say, hey, give me some IPs, give me some domains, and they start kind of with internet records and they go. We say, we don't want any of that. All we want is your company name. So pick whatever company you want, or your agency, or the state, again, the state of Maryland. And we go off and we try to build our own answer to, who are you? And so we have an example recently where there's a company that kind of is a conglomerate. They've got 18 operating companies. And when we were done building our list of, inside of those 18 operating companies, what entities can we find? We found 977 different entities that an attacker could go exploit, could conceivably go exploit. And so it's subsidiaries, it's joint ventures, it's businesses that you have a majority ownership in. It could even be just like a net block, where you went and got a net block that might be registered under some obscure name, and we've found some crazy ones, but where an attacker can get in. So that first step of understanding who you are, like, you've got to do deeply and you've got to do well first. Then we use that information to go discover all of the network assets. Because if you go ask a company, like, tell us all your IPs, they're really smart people, but often they don't know. And so we try to do it all ourselves first to say, who are you? And then use that information to go discover all of the domains and all of the IPs. And then we do the kind of thing that you would think we would do, which is domains and IPs. And we find all of the networks and we find out what service is running on all of the assets, what service version. We connect that to CVE. And then we help prioritize the CVE to make it actionable, like what's most likely to get exploited today. So here's what you should go fix today. All of that sounds very standard. The two things we do differently there, number one, we make use of the core technology I mentioned before that we originally started with. It's in the name Six. So the first capability we built was how do you map the global IPv6 space? That was thought to be impossible, but our founder built that capability. And so once we go again from who are you to what do you own, we find all IPv4 and IPv6 assets. Again, the customer has to give us nothing. We don't need any information from you. And the other thing we do is we interrogate or we assess all 65,535 ports every time we every time we do our mapping. And so what we end up with is we kind of find the things you didn't know were there. We find what's there. We find the things you didn't know were there by finding all of the entities and then finding all of the V6 and V4 addresses and all 65,000 ports.
Got it. You mentioned that particular example of the conglomerate. Is this what is the ICP? Is it an enterprise? Is it all?
Yeah, so actually we started by selling to DoD and government organizations, and we still do. We did a deal recently with a state which was unbelievable. We mapped all state agencies, all state universities, all the health systems, all 105 counties. And by the way, when we did every county, that means we did the school systems, the fire departments, the water. And so when you look at that entity map, it's wild. And we're able to give a full roll up. So the state CISO, to the extent he or she's allowed, can see everything underneath of it, and every organization can see only what's there. It's the first time they've ever had a roll up like that. And of course, we do enterprises as well. You asked me what our ICP is. It's really at this point, it's got less to do with industry and size of company, but where we show our value the greatest as compared to current tools is when you have a more complex organization. So if your company, even if you're relative, a couple $100 million in revenue, but if you've grown through acquisition, like it's hard to know what you own. And by the way, when you're acquiring companies, you're probably disposing of assets too, and making sure everything you thought you disposed of is gone. And so, another customer we signed recently is a massive global consumer electronics company. You probably have their products hanging on your wall. And the reason they were so interested, similar to the state, is because many of their operating entities have solutions, but they had no ability. First, they weren't complete and the data wasn't great, but the global team had no ability to kind of roll it up in a way that they could really understand the full corporate risk. So if I was trying to be more succinct, Joseph, sorry about the long answer, I would say generally if your company, the more complex it is, the more kind of dynamic it's been over years, the harder it is to really understand yourself and everything you own. And that's where we're really, really good. We do have customers that have simpler businesses, but we're as an outreach, it's to those more complex businesses.
Very cool. Love it. There was something I wanted to run by you. So you wrote a post on LinkedIn about the sort of cyber threats associated with M&A. Do you remember that post within the last month or so?
I do.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what made you put that out there?
Well, we know two things are true. One is the incidence of attacks on companies that are during an M&A process is going up. So, if company A is acquiring company B and word gets out, or they've just acquired it, then, attackers are often going after company B, the acquired company, so that they can ransom it to company A or that they've got leverage. That's a moment of leverage where there's a lot at stake. And so, when you're going through M&A, either you're buying a company or selling a company, that is a moment in time when attackers are paying attention to you. So first, that's where you really should make sure your defenses are set. Second, when you acquire a company, and I like to use this analogy, right? I've been married for a long time, but when I married my wife, like I didn't inherit her DNA. Her family medical history remained hers, obviously to our kids, but mine remained mine. But that's not the case with an M&A.
Mm.
The moment you've acquired a company, you've inherited all their historical, the good stuff and all the bad stuff. And so the challenge then is really understanding, what did you inherit? And so I'll go back to that example of the conglomerate. The last seven acquisitions they made, six, the last six acquisitions they made, those companies had acquired a total of 33 companies before they got bought by this company. And you can imagine those companies acquired companies. So when you're buying a company, you better do the full diligence. And we work with some companies that do M&A cyber due diligence. They had been using some other competitive tools. As soon as they saw all of our capabilities, they now use us exclusively because we do that full kind of understanding of the org that's getting acquired, so we can really quantify the risk.
Yeah, makes sense. Really cool. Thanks for sharing that. So, I guess when I was at Black Hat, I asked this question quite a bit, and it was really interesting the results because obviously AI is everywhere at the moment. And I think the question I was keen to find out from you, do you see AI as a headwind or a tailwind?
Look, I think undeniably it's both. When you have the same capabilities available to attackers and defenders, the attackers are going to use it, and defenders better use it. Look, I think we're always challenged because attackers and defenders play by different rules, and that always makes it harder. So I think the attackers are probably a little bit ahead right now in using AI because they don't have to worry about compliance and regulation, and like they can just do whatever they need to do. So I think defenders, have an obligation to understand that they need to use AI to defend against AI,
Mm,
and we need to be really kind of aggressive because the attackers are. So the short
yeah.
answer is I think it's both a headwind and a tailwind, and
Mm.
and look, you can choose to dislike AI for more reasons, for whatever reasons you want, but the genie's out of the bottle, and if the attacker's going to use it, defenders better.
Yeah, exactly that. Well put. Um, so talking about the future for SixMap and what you guys are up to, how does the sort of the next 3 to 5 years look for you guys? I know you've been there a year now.
Yeah, a little over a year. Look, I think it's really, really exciting because we've made some additions to our team who really kind of really appreciate the value of the data that we have. It's taken a little bit of time to help the world kind of understand this entity first approach, understanding who you are. Many companies think they know, some do, many don't. So I think for us, we sort of have a faster, wider, deeper mantra here. From a faster perspective, we think it's a velocity game, attacker versus defender. So, somebody spins up a new VCP or whatever in Amazon, like who sees it first, the attacker or defender?
Mm.
A new CVE gets out, who sees it or fixes it first, the attacker or defender? And so we need to continue to get faster and faster at identifying exposures so our customers can manage that. We need to get wider because the attack surface is dynamic, and there's just more out there that people can attack, whether it's OT or whether it's different cloud or whatever. So that's what I mean by wider, and deeper really is just for the surface we cover today, there's more risk that we can expose. And so, I think if we can do those three things really well and use our differentiated approach with our core V6 technology, we're going to be in a really, really good spot.
Yeah, well, Jason, I really appreciate the time that you've taken out your day to jump on the show, and I wish you all the best of success with SixMap, my man, and looking forward to getting a beer with you.
Joseph, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing about your marathon time later this year.
Legend. Thanks, mate.
Take